Welcome to chapter one of Amongst Thieves. I have done this intro a million times because I keep not being able to read properly. Maybe it's because I'm so tired. This is a story about a romance author whose husband has died, so she can no longer write romance because she is heartbroken and she goes off to British Columbia to her family friend's like cottage house hotel thing and ends up falling in love with two men because I like thruples. So this is the first chapter, and hopefully I can actually read it this time, unlike the other four times I've tried to record this. My father, like all middle aged, middle class white men, insisted that we arrive at the airport 3 hours before check in even started. I, like most depressed young women, wanted to sleep in as much as possible. The compromise was that I got to sleep for an extra 5 minutes, just enough time for him to walk down the driveway and start the engine of the car so it could idle in the cold. I woke up to the thick smell of gasoline, mingled in with the five espresso shots my mother had pulled for my big day. The worst part was that he wasn't even the one flying. He probably wasn't even going to step foot in the airport until my mother reminded him that I would need help with my suitcases. Both my parents were coming on the journey to drop me off, sending me off to my new adventure, to a better life, like I was a medieval woman getting married off to a rich, out of country suitor, one that reeked of spices and mulled wines and would drape me in silks for the first month before settling down into his usual alcoholic buffoonery. They were optimistic, hopeful. I, the chronic pessimist, had as much faith in their decision as I had faith in a heavily discounted bungee jumping experience. Still, I went along with it. My father was certainly dressed like he was giving me away. Crisp slacks and jacket combination, his hair combed neatly. He even put on a tie, stark red, like he was a politician ready to get reelected. My mother wasn't much better, but she had at least been dissuaded from wearing her 5 inch heels. 3 inch boots I could not even begin to try to sway her from. There was something in her Slavic roots that didn't allow her to leave the house even looking even infinitesimally unkempt. Not once had she answered the door in her housecoat. Her hair was slicked back into her usual ponytail, her makeup proper, like she wasn't about to cry it off when I slipped through security. I was the only person who was dressed for an airplane, which was fair considering I was the one with the ticket. My blonde hair was still in its sleep braids, frizzy and half falling out. They do the trick of keeping my hair out of my eyes while I napped. I certainly needed to nap, the bag so deep under my hazel eyes that I was at risk of needing to check them in. Pimples mingled in with the freckles on my face. I had even been too lazy to put on patches the night before. To be fair, I was dressed for a much longer flight than the 4 hour one to British Columbia, or rather, the one to Calgary, and then the shorter, sketchier flight to Kelowna. I was dressed for an overnight flight to Europe, where the lights would be dimmed for the majority of the flight and most people would sleep. This flight would be the opposite. Excited mountaineers, skiers, and the odd Bigfoot hunter would be all chatting about the great wilderness and cheap weed that awaited them in British Columbia. I only hoped that my seat neighbor would see and respect my resting bitch face and not actually make me act on it. Elliot, my beloved Doberman, was about as stressed as I was, if not more. Since he wasn't a service dog, he needed to be crated and would be stored below the plane, much to my disappointment. For the sake of the comfort of the baggage people, I had muzzled him, even though he had never ever bitten anybody. Not that he would, but I knew the perception of large dogs, ones that looked muscular, with eyes so intense that they would rip through a person just by looking. My broad, tall dog had a rather nasty habit of staring at people like they were threats. Never once had he pulled up his lips back over his teeth to growl. Currently, he looked like he did when he was a puppy, as he was being wheeled through the airport, his eyes wide, his ears flat against his head. An occasional whimper escaped his lips, which pulled at my heartstrings every time. Dahlia is such a doll for letting you stay, my mother was saying excitedly, her accent thick on the word doll. She didn't even owe me a favor. Such a lovely woman. Yeah, so nice. I clenched my Starbucks tighter in my hand. Iced macchiato, 2 extra shots, sugar-free vanilla, and oat milk. My go-to, my father is paying for this drink. The second caffeinated beverage of the day, the 6th to 10th espresso shot mingled up in one. Would I get sleep on the flight? Probably not, but it would provide me with an energy boost that would make the day at least somewhat tolerable, better than the usual miserable. Besides, my father had paid for it. How could I say no? Maybe it'd make my heart stop before we landed. I wouldn't mind that. And she's not even charging you rent. My mother's heels clacked loudly against the tiled floor, punctuating the sentence. It was the same spiel I had gotten for the last 2 months, ever since Dahlia Rivers had offered me a room in her mountainside motel for an entire year. I didn't know why she kept trying to sell me on it. I had agreed the first time it was mentioned. Anything to get out of my parents' house, anything to get me back on my feet. Mm hmm. I swirled the ice in my drink, savoring the jangle of the cubes together, like a symphony for desperate people, looking for just enough energy to power through the next couple hours. It'll be an amazing place to work on your book. She clapped her hands together like a gleeful little girl, not noticing how the plastic cup crumpled under my grip. My father, however, did. This is an opportunity you cannot afford to pass up, Tatiana, he said, all businesslike. It reminded me of my agent, of my editor. He even said my name the same way they did, lacking the usual punch a Slavic speaker would give it. Just try to be grateful. I am grateful. And I was. Despite my indignant reluctance, I knew this was a chance that basically nobody got. A rentless year, free from the overwhelming concern and disappointment from my parents leaching into every waking moment. Out of everybody involved, I had the most to lose if this didn't work out. Just because I was unenthusiastic about it didn't mean that I didn't appreciate it. Then act like it, my father hissed, low enough that my mother couldn't hear. The urge to dump my coffee over his business attire was usurped by the desperation only caffeine withdrawal could cause. Instead, I gave him my business smile, the one that I would wear in interviews or at panels, the one that didn't quite meet my eyes, the one that never could. It slid too easily on my face. It's going to be great for my book, I said, turning my attention back to my mother. All the fresh air will be nice for the brain. My mother nodded. There is something so romantic about mountains, she said dreamily. Maybe because she'd be at home there, with her head already in the clouds. It will be absolutely perfect. The last word hit hard. I hadn't had anything be perfect in the last 2 years, especially regarding writing. There was always the mythos about the perfect muse, the flow state you would get into when you were consumed with inspiration. That had maybe happened once a year when I was actively in my career, and even then, it wasn't usually as poetic as these stints were made out to be. It involved quite a few cans of energy drinks, forgetting bodily functions, and only eating the skin I had chewed off the insides of my cheeks for at least 24 hours before the inevitable crash and subsequent week long coma. Back then, I had had somebody to take care of me. Now I didn't. Yeah, I said, pulling up to the baggage line. Perfect. My father handled most of it, letting my mother stand out of the line. I stood behind him like I was a little girl again and wasn't able to handle my own stuff at the airport. Most of our interactions were like this one, him doing the talking, me being present because I had to be. I did take a long while to say goodbye to Elliot, making sure he had one last bite before getting on the flight. My father was displeased by that delay, but I didn't care. My flight didn't board for another 2 hours. Getting through security wasn't going to take that long. Still, he rushed me after my goodbye, doing all the talking to the baggage worker. Every once in a while, I had to scan my boarding pass, but after I was significantly lighter, the only thing left with me was my laptop bag, strapped over my body, lying to everybody with the implication that I would do work on the flight. My mother was talking to me about stopping for another coffee or grabbing herself an overpriced souvenirs from one of the many little stores on the general side of the airport, fluttering around like a little bird trapped in a grocery store. I gave my father a glance to ask if he could corral her, and luckily for me, he did. Tati is tired, he said bluntly, putting his hand on my shoulder and giving it a tense squeeze. She needs to get to her gate so she can relax before her long flight. Oh, my mother's bustling stopped, her lower lip starting to waver. Oh no. Her eyes started to water as she took in a shuddering bath. Tatiana. It's only a year, I assured her, trying to keep her from causing too large of a scene. I had no idea why she was being so emotional now. I had moved out for over a decade before the accident. I visited maybe once or twice a year, and usually not for long. Maybe we had a monthly phone call, if either of us remembered. Maybe it was because this time I was going by myself. All the times before I had him. A whole year, she exclaimed, thick tears falling down her cheeks. She brushed them away, smearing the rest of her makeup, excluding her perfectly red lipstick. You will come back for Christmas, right? I glanced up at my father to ask if he would foot that bill. His blank expression gave me nothing, so I simply said, We'll see, because I wasn't comfortable with lying directly to my mother's face. At that, my mother let out a wail and wrapped her arms around me. I stiffened, trying to pull back to keep her face from transferring to my clothes. The ice clattered in my cup as I patted her on the back with a hand holding my coffee. If I need to, I'll come home early. My mother pulled back, and thankfully, my shirt was mostly spared, exempting the little foundation that was left on the white stripe of my sweater. My father's gaze bore into me as I finished my inspection of my clothes. I glanced up to see his curled lip, telling me that the only way I was coming home early was if I was on my deathbed. My mother was under the impression that if I came back with an unfinished manuscript, that it would be fine. My father wouldn't open the door if that was the case. It was an option, but not one he approved of. She needs to go through security, my father said, snaking his arm into my mother's. As he pulled her back from me, she settled into her housewife persona, wiping away her tears and standing tall, a placid smile on her face, like a doll still in its original packaging, there entirely for show. I'll call you when I land, I told her, giving her one last side hug and my father a firm nod before I brushed past both of them. When I was out of sight, I dumped the rest of my coffee into the trash, getting my passport ready as I headed to the security gate. And that is chapter one. Um, I'm really mean to Tati's mom, I realize. I should probably be nicer. But I hope you enjoyed. Maybe it makes you interested. I don't know. But let me know. Also, I don't know about the thumbnails for these videos because I have the set template and it's just like the same thing with a different title. I don't know if maybe I should put like a little graphic or things like that, but I am not an artist, so I don't have like drawings of my characters and I'm poor, so I can't afford to do commissions. But maybe I'll just put like some Canva edits or something like that. But I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to hear more writing from me, I am going to be recording another scene from this. It is later on in the book and it will probably be heavily edited. It will probably be head. I can't speak now. I just spoke for too long. It will be edited and it will not be the same, but I will record that scene anyways because I think it's really cute. Apologies if you heard my cat jingle jangle in the background. She was moving into her usual chair by my bed. But again, if you like this video, please like it and subscribe to hear more. Thank you and have a lovely day. Ah, this is a complicated sentence because I wrote it so stupidly. Beside, my father has paid for the drink. Beside.